Hey babes, and welcome to The Rebels, Chapter 37. If you're brand spanking new here, thank you so much for showing up. My name is Nadia Sayapin, and I am the author of this work we're about to read. For your information, I do not edit anything in these videos because I'm actually reading it for a friend of mine who requires audiobooks. And because I'm reading it, she thinks it's funny when I make mistakes. So I'm keeping this in here for her entertainment and her entertainment only. But I'm really, really glad you came and found me. There is an entire playlist for this book. Do feel free to go and check that out because if you've just found this, this is pretty far down the book. All right, I'm going to get into The Rebels, Chapter 37. The next morning found me in the common room nursing a hangover, unable to decide which was worse, the disease or the cure. Eleanor had a nasty-smelling concoction to help with hangovers that she called an old family recipe. The rest of us called it barely better than suffering all day. What can I say? The name's a work in progress. My holsters, guns, rags, oil, and soap lay in a heap on the table in front of me as I propped my head on my hand, an elbow resting on the table. I desperately wanted to crawl back into bed, but after the exertions of the last few days, I really needed to clean my gear. Plus, Eleanor banged on my door until I got up. I perused the contents of my mug, trying to work up the courage to drink it, when Phoenix wobbled into the room and gingerly sat down across from me, glaring blearily through hanks of hair when I sniggered. "Are you gonna die on me?" I asked, peering at her through my fingers without raising my head. "Not so loud," she complained, clutching her head. "I wish I was. Then maybe Eleanor would let me sleep." "Eleanor's sludge is in the pot." I rolled my head to the left, toward the kitchen. "Help yourself." Phoenix sighed, levering herself up and shuffling to the counter where the pot rested. "My bra's wearing thin, and the scavengers haven't been finding enough replacements." After filling her cup, she brought it to her mouth, tossing the drink back quickly, grimacing as she swallowed. "God, that shit's disgusting!" Wiping her mouth, she refilled the mug and came back to the table. "We need more bras." I finally drained my mug, clenching my teeth to keep from gagging. After a moment to recover, I opened my eyes. "Dunno. High Tide said that most of the fighters have got something. They're still working on finding a good style, but we should be able to replace yours with a proper bra. It's only the civilians who are hit and miss, and Lavender says walking around without a bra won't hurt 'em." I sighed. No point in putting it off any longer. I refilled my own cup and sat back down, getting to work on cleaning gear. In truth, I liked mindless tasks. Your brain can go for a wander while your hands do the work. As I scrubbed another set of straps, Phoenix wandered away, then came back with all her guns. Like me, she carried 4 handguns and a smaller, maneuverable rifle for distance shooting, but she also had the huge sniper rifle that sat on a bipod. She laid all 6 out on the table next to me, beginning the never-ending round of cleaning. The experienced fighters were constantly armed, first to be prepared, and secondly because we insisted the trainees always be armed and it'd be hypocritical of us not to. The only exception to this rule was during cleaning, and I found it disturbing how I relaxed the moment I rearmed myself. Others filtered through, some just finishing a round in the gym, some learning how to take care of their gear, others heading to the kitchen to take over the next cooking shift. Amanaser brought out a cutting board, knife, and a whole bunch of weeds. Doc and Wildwood, our herbalist, decreed that we all needed to eat as many greens as possible. So once a week, the kitchen made a green soup out of whatever could be gathered from the forest. This meant dandelion, skunkweed, and nettles, with whatever else they had thrown in the mix. "Aren't you going to do training today, or just polish that all day?" Amana nodded to my holsters. "I'm gonna do as little as possible until I'm sure my head won't fall off." Amana organized her board and bowls and began chopping dandelion roots for the soup. "See?" She raised an eyebrow, index finger and thumb steadying the knife while the rest of her fingers gripped the handle. The fingers of her left hand curved slightly so the blade could rest against her knuckles as she chopped quickly. I heaved an aggrieved sigh. "I'll take a run and hit the gym after I've cared for my gear. Me and Phoenix are the last ones, I think." We worked in companionable silence for a while, watching the rest of the people as they went about their days. How's the tannery coming along? Phoenix almost lost her bra the other day. Ah, high tide, she has cinco ayudantes. That's five something. And the man trained muy bien. Maybe she will decelo a él. What? I glared at her over the table. Why? Phoenix moaned. Why does she do this to us? There are 5 people helping in the cortedoria. Amana spoke slowly, maintaining eye contact. One man, very good. Maybe she will give him control of production. I hate you, I said clearly. Who's in there? Are they any good at it? Ah, nobody is the man who works good tanning. Wisteria is making bras. Only okay, Amana interjected when I opened my mouth. Not very good ones. Al is inutile. I sighed, doing my best to give her the evil eye. The corner of her mouth twitched while her hands never stopped. He cannot fight, he cannot cook, and he kill everything he plant. So he go to Cortedoria. Ruby no trabajo, Lavender Center to Cortedoria. There is un niñita who also trabaja en la Cortiembre. Optimus Prime. Optimus Prime? I snorted a quick breath of laughter, stopping when the motion threatened my stomach's equilibrium. I need to meet the girl who, I gasped, trying to keep still. Decided to be called Optimus Prime? You've seen her, Amana informed me, moving on to the leafy greens. She put on a pair of lightweight gardening gloves to shred the stinging nettle. She's in the gym when she isn't in the tannery. Phoenix rolled her eyes. You are so oblivious, it's scary. I snorted some giggles, hands immediately going back to my gear as I thought. The really short one with the black eyes and light hair? See. How about the other girls? The ones who got attacked? I went still and looked down to realize I'd finished with the holsters and belts already. Huh. I went to work on the handguns. The handguns were relatively simple to care for now and happened on autopilot. My pump-action rifle had more moving parts than Phoenix's bolt-action, but less than her massive semi-auto, so I'd hoped I'd be done faster than her. As we worked, Amana continued to fill me in on the people she encountered every day, which was nearly everyone, and all the little tidbits that she thought interesting or important. A crash startled me and I slammed the magazine into place, racking the slide as I leaped to my feet, pistol in hand, ready to shoot. A pot? The lid on the soup pot had jumped with the force of the escaping steam, creating the noise. I gave a shaky little laugh, looking around the room to find Phoenix lowering her rifle, while the rest of the room stared at us, mouths open. Oops. We need to change something, Phoenix exploded, pacing around the table in the useless room, where we were joined by Seahorse, Eleanor, and Driver. While we may have been sitting at the table, we were far from calm, all of us twitchy with cabin fever. It's been 2 weeks since that travesty of an ambush. Steve's been all over these hills ever since. Every patrol we'd spotted had a minimum of 2 vehicles, and numerous foot patrols scoured the hills. Scavenging, hunting, and raiding had ground to a screeching halt. What if we change the way we ambush? Seahorse asked. I looked up, eyebrows raised. I kept trying to only raise one, but it never worked. I simply didn't have independently working eyebrows. My brother Sean could go full Spock, but my best option was looking terminally surprised. Can't whistle, can't raise a single eyebrow. What you got in mind? I asked. Seahorse sat forward, gathering up the army pieces we used for visuals. Right. So what we gotta do is this. We all piled together, examining the board as she laid out her plan. The preparations went slowly, since everything had to be low-key enough that Steve's patrols didn't catch us, requiring long hours and plenty of detours for those leaving the lair. Eleanor somehow still found time to check in on each of us who'd stepped foot inside the brothel, though. When I asked her how she kept up with everything, she gave the most elegant shrug I'd ever seen. I don't deal with everyone. Lavender monitors the kids and civilians. Sarge has all the trainees, Seahorse helps him, and Amana oversees everything. I only have you girls, all the ones we started with. It gives me time for the rest of my duties." Eleanor's chosen duties were a long list, from occasionally acting as a nurse for Doc to helping in the kitchen, being a willing ear for hurting hearts, and a never-ending load of mending. "You know," I said, looking up from sharpening my knife for the umpteenth time, surrounded by branches, leaves, and rope, "I talked with Amana the other week, and I have no idea how that woman keeps track of so many people. I had to keep asking her for descriptions because I had no idea who she was talking about half the time. How bad is that?" "I'd hardly call it bad." Eleanor sat down and fished a bit of mending out of her shoulder bag. "That thing went with her everywhere, and she constantly put little bits and bobs in it, usually finding a use for each one later. You're an introvert, dear, and suddenly finding yourself at the head of a mob doesn't change that. I'd say this is the healthiest way for you to manage. If you're not crazy yet, then I'd say it's working. Now, have you heard about—" As she talked, I realized this conversation had the exact same flavor as the one with Amana. She filled me in about the people inside the lair, particularly the fighters, about the issues they dealt with, whether or not they were physically or mentally able to go into the field. "Are you listening?" Eleanor looked up from her mending, eyebrow raised. Damn it. "Yes, Mother." I grinned, setting down the whetstone, a warm glow filling my stomach at the look of surprise and delight on her face. That's a scene break, guys. I lay still, breathing shallowly as I watched soldiers walk past the bush I hid under. I wore a jacket and cargo pants under a blanket made of rope and string, carefully decorated with plants to help me blend in with the scenery. This was our second ambush using Seahorse's proposed plan and style, and each one required careful preparation. We'd meticulously chosen this site, well south of the lair and on the edge of Steve's southern patrol range, and it'd taken us 4 days just to get here, 2 driving, 2 on foot. Fighters dotted the steep hillside, concealed under handmade camouflage neck cloaks. We'd brought everyone Sarge deemed ready to fight, and this was Jewel's first fighting mission after her shooting last winter. Leaving the lair is different now. With the deaths from the failed raid still hanging over our heads, the apprehension created a bad taste at the back of my tongue. The first time we left, fighters and civilians stood about awkwardly, unsure how to say goodbye without feeling superstitious about it. Eleanor nudged me. "Why do I always have to say something?" I hissed. "Because you're the closest thing we have to a leader," she murmured. "Sucks to be you." "Bane of my existence," I muttered. A few people noticed us talking, and a growing circle of quiet surrounded us as people stopped to stare. Faced by all those eyes, I panicked and blurted, "All in, all out!" then closed my eyes in despair. We'd only use these at funerals. "Hoorah!" Fighters punched the air. My eyes popped open. Okay, go with that then. "One shot, one kill!" "Hoorah!" "No luck, all skill!" the fighters roared. Guess it hadn't been the wrong thing to say after all. Returning to the present as a foot fell dangerously near me, I watched the black boots continue on. We dug trenches, loosened and moved stones, piled rocks, and moved down trees. I'd learned more about ropes and knots than I'd known existed. We all sported blisters, splinters, and one guy managed to get himself a herniated disc. Phoenix had offered to help him, but no! He was a big, strong man. Idiot. Not 3 feet away from me, one of the soldiers sprouted an arrow, accompanied by screaming, and I bared my teeth. Time to start. The soldiers fell into a crouch, hiding as best they could in the surrounding shrubs. The one unfortunate enough to choose my bush was met with a knife in the eye, and I grunted as I rolled, dragging the body with me to dump him out of my way. Upslope, the people Steve had chased into this mess, Storm and Legs, paused long enough to fire an arrow each before running again. More cries erupted, and the ones that were too loud were abruptly silenced. Fear, shock, pain, all these could be heard in our enemies' voices. Even hiding in bushes wasn't enough to save those men. An arrow flickered past overhead, followed by a short cry down the slope. The second half of the patrol finally joined us. I grinned, gathering the rope as everything went still. I waited, panting lightly, watching the boots march past. When one pair of feet straddled it, I rolled, pulling the rope taut. The man yelled and went down, legs hopelessly tangled. He grasped desperately at the soldier in front, pulling the man off balance and tripping up the soldier behind. In that confusion, a flat patch of leaves and pine needles burst up as two fighters leaped out, fired a crossbow bolt each, and raced away up the slope, abandoning the cover they'd hidden under. I scrambled out of my rope, tripping as my foot caught in it before skidding around the tree, hiding behind the trunk as shots were fired. I strung my own bow and took up a quiver of arrows before running to change position. Both patrols scattered throughout the forest as careful shots from above forced them apart. Crashing sounded to the north, accompanied by screams. The rock slide we'd carefully built. I fired at a soldier, missed, ducked around a bush, ran behind a carefully constructed screen of ropes, simulating a solid wall of bushes with 4 other fighters. A second later it dropped, and we fired 3 fast shots before scattering, all heading uphill. Barely leaping a covered pit in time, I slammed into a tree and felt the impact of a bullet next to my cheek before pushing off. At every bit of cover we fired, always, always running uphill. A short scream behind me as the soldier didn't make the leap and met the stakes at the bottom of the pit. Steve didn't do so good at hills. They tended to rely on guns to reach people, and on all the chaos, trees, and plants that really shouldn't have been Plan A. A crunching, booming rumble gave scant warning, and I threw myself down, huddling against a tree. Oi! I bellowed up the hill through the dust. When the logs passed, I couldn't find my bow. Abandoning it, I kept running and found myself next to a soldier. I lunged, right hand whipping out the hunting knife in the small of my back as I stabbed. I don't know where I hit. I heard a grunt and ran again. I couldn't breathe. The uphill, the altitude. Ink streaked past, wearing a camouflage cloak of leaves. Now you're making me look bad, I mumbled. 4 men were in hot pursuit. The one closest slowed, shock etched in his face as my knife entered his belly, and I shoved him away, hot on the heels of the other 3. The second in line tripped, a rope tangling his legs. The third jumped him, and I fell on the downed men, knees first, thrusting twice before gaining my feet and running once more. River, also wearing a cloak, shot the third man with a crossbow just as the first tripped a wire, taking a branch and stake through the chest. Cutting to the north, I saw Hawk go down and Feisty raced out, dragging the injured woman back to safety. Screams echoed over the mountains, cracks, snaps, more rocks and logs tumbling down, and in the center I stood, listening. A woman cackled uphill from me. Phoenix. She'd made it down from her tree. Fresh shouting down the hill. More troops. I hauled ass up the hill, skidding down behind the low rampart we'd built, finding myself next to Phoenix. More are coming, I rasped, unable to catch my breath. You're the last. Phoenix grinned at me through the mud coating her face and the leaves and twigs in her hair and clothes. Sure? I'm sure. I'm sure. I looked over to see Eleanor. I counted. You are definitely the last. Time for the grand finale, then. Hawk was in bad shape. We split into groups, and Legs and Feisty carried the woman. We also had a broken leg, 2 more gunshots that Doc stabilized, and a slew of bruises, cuts, nicks, and sprains. Doc stayed with Hawk as everyone split into prearranged groups with instructions to make their way off the paths through the trees while staying in contact. A few of us would remain behind to give them cover and a head start. Pain, fear, and grim determination were visible on everyone's faces. All in, all out, I said quietly. Hoorah! Phoenix punched the air. No luck, all skill. Hoorah! More joined in. 1 shot, 1 kill. Hoorah! Teeth were bared in jubilation. Let's show these assholes what Oregonians are really like. I grinned around the circle, finding answering smiles on most faces. Move out, cause havoc when you need to, disappear when you can. The fighters began filing out, heading toward a rock face with a slight cleft in it. The hunters had found this area, and we deepened the cleft to provide more cover. From 10 feet away, you'd never know it was there. You had to be looking at it from the right angle. The trail dropped off on the other side of the ridge into a steep mountain valley, and a taller ridge rose up behind that. In between, ranks of evergreen trees formed waves of green, crisscrossed with deer trails. This was our territory, and we would take every advantage of it. Phoenix and Seahorse stayed behind with me, and we pulled out the rifles we'd stashed for the occasion. The psychological effects of arrows finally gave way to the necessity of bullets against greater numbers. Anybody else notice how we went from like 10 soldiers to 100? Phoenix asked as she settled in with her smaller rifle, snuggling her cheek against the stock. We're killing these ones, right? Yes, I rolled my eyes. If you can find one. This lot showed a healthy level of self-preservation, keeping their heads low as they made their way up the slope. Yay, Phoenix mumbled, already sighting down the slope. I really can't say I expected this many to show up, Seahorse said. She also had a bolt action, though hers had a small box magazine that carried 5 rounds, and she took her first shot. A small rustle in a bush and a limp hand falling out said she'd made her shot. Honestly, I thought we'd have 50 at most. You know, wipe them out, disappear, all that stuff. Family motto won out. I watched a bush I thought moved, waiting for another sign. Next to me, Phoenix's rifle boomed again. I winced and dug through my jacket pocket, hoping. I grinned when my fingers met earplugs and I pulled them out and sighed in relief as the sound was partially blocked. You have a motto? Phoenix eyed me. Well, no. There was movement in the bush. As soon as I decided on the location, I squeezed the trigger gently, absorbing the recoil and working the slide on the pump. A body fell from the bush I'd been watching. But if we did, it's expect the worst, hope for the best, prepare for the ridiculous. Words to live by. Seahorse's laughing eyes belied her solemn face. She pulled the trigger. I didn't see where it went, but a faint cry drifted up. I hope Dereva and Wilder found lots of their cars. I tracked over the ground looking for a new target. We really need the parts, or new cars. I'm not picky. Watch the sides. Seahorse shifted suddenly, aiming to her left. They're trying to circle around. Phoenix took the north while I kept firing down the middle. Okay, I'm not really sure, I said, adjusting the scope to try for a clearer image, but I think they have one of those things where you drop the bomb thingy in a tube and it shoots it a hell of a long way. A mortar? Seahorse took her shot and rolled back, face white. Is that what that is? I tried, but my rifle couldn't touch the men working it. Phoenix, never mind! Huddle! The mortar men dropped a bomb thing down the tube, and within seconds I knew nothing. All right, that is the end of chapter 37. Thank you so much for being here, and I will be back again next week with chapter 38. See ya, and take care. If you enjoyed this, do please like, share, subscribe, all the fun things. Drop a comment. It doesn't always let me see or reply to the comments, but I am still learning how to use YouTube like that as a creator. So leave a comment. Give me a chance to learn. See you next week.